Hello and welcome to Leafless, Not Lifeless. I'm Sharon Benjamin, your host. Thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate it. So if you want to get in touch, you can contact us at leaflessnotlifeless@gmail.com. Listen, we have an amazing show today, but before we get into that, let me just tell you, when we see the leaves fall in the autumn or when we see them changing colors, they're beautiful. We love that. But the leaves don't fall just to be falling. It's really a protective mechanism. I learned this from Britannica, Encyclopedia Britannica. So if you will notice, the evergreen trees don't lose their leaves, and there's a reason for that. The leaves are thicker, they have wax on them, and they have resin on them, so it protects them from the cold and the wind and the rain, etc. However, deciduous trees, that's not the case. The leaves are thinner, and if they were to stay on, if you remember from biology and science, when water freezes, it expands. So if the leaves did not fall, the water would expand, destroy the cells in the leaves, and it would prevent photosynthesis. But when we look at the leaves, we look at the trees, there aren't any leaves there, and we might think, well, nothing's going on, but that's not true because growth is still taking place. And it's evident because the next season, we see that growth has taken place and there's more life. And such is the case with my guest today, who is going to talk to us about something she's been doing. Discrimination happens in so many different ways. And one of the ways that it happens is just by appearance, how people see us, how they evaluate us, what they think about us. So my guest today is going to talk about how Muslim women are navigating in the workforce, deciding, do I wear a hijab or do I not? What are people going to think about me? How they're going to perceive me? Do they perceive me as not being capable to do the job or just what? So Fatima Kouras, thank you so much for being with me.
Thank you, Sharon. I really appreciate this opportunity to be speaking with you. And thank you for the science lesson or the recap.
Yes.
Yeah, and as you were speaking about the trees and the leaves, I was thinking about myself and my experience and women I interviewed and how there's this experience of like that ebb and flow that you have these, sometimes it's really great and people understand you and people appreciate you. And there's sometimes there are experiences that could really
shake you
make you feel broken. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. So Fatima, you have been doing some work and research regarding Muslim women and just how they are having to navigate the workplace. And just because so many other things are going on in the world, how are people viewing them and what are they thinking about them, how they treat them? So why did you start to do this?
Well, this all started about maybe, I was young, 25 years ago. I was working and I had a male colleague who wasn't talking to me. Every time we were in the same workspace, he would not look me in the eye. And then one day I spoke to him and we were talking and he's like, I didn't think you could speak to me. And I'm like, why would you not think I could speak to you? And he was like, oh, because you're covered and you're Muslim and Muslim men are not allowed to speak, especially to men. And I was like, well, I'm here working. Obviously I can speak. You hear me speaking, you hear my voice. And that made me think what is happening in other people's minds? Because sometimes we're just thinking about ourselves and our own experiences. We're not thinking about others. And I started asking around friends, what is your experience working? And that's when I got a large flow of, comments about their experiences. And that I was in I started doing a master's program in women's studies. And that I was thinking about my dissertation and what I'm going to write about. And that led me to write about the women who wear the headscarf, the hijab, in the workplace. And I want to, focus on that experience and focus specifically on women who are living in the US and their experiences.
So I was going to ask you, where was your focus? Is it just in the United States or
yes.
Are you looking other places? Do you plan to go global or are you just going to focus on the United States?
Now I'm focusing on the United States.
Okay.
Because I think it's a particular experience. And I was also looking at how also the political state also matters. So that, that also aligns with my my project. So for now, I am looking specifically at the United States. I think it gets complicated and complex. Some of my studies, I read about what's happening in Europe, but because of my unfamiliarity with the context, I felt most comfortable focusing on the United States.
Yes. Now, help me pronounce it correctly. I don't know if I did earlier.
It's hijab.
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 Okay.
Hijab, yes. But you did a good job. You did a good job earlier. Yes. And I appreciate you taking making the effort to call it the hijab.
Well, because a lot of times, and you've probably seen this as you're doing your research, sometimes people just don't know. You mentioned
Exactly.
a male colleague at your former job. We hear so many things. One of my former colleagues, who is Canadian, dual citizenship, but she mentioned that the only Black people she had seen were on TV. So often we get our information from unreliable sources.
Yes.
So with him making those comments to you, he probably was not being any way negative, but because of, just what he had seen and heard.
Yes, and I'm glad you brought that up, because a lot of the misconceptions and the stereotypes come from the TV, come from movies, come from the news, and women I even spoke to, that when something traumatic would happen in the news, the next day their work environment, their colleagues, their peers held on to that, and that it made their experience a little bit more difficult, especially when you're visibly Muslim, because it's sometimes easy to pass when you're not visibly Muslim.
Yes.
And if you carry maybe a different name, or if you wear certain clothes or ask for days off for holidays, people could know you're Muslim. And I even say that in my research, like you come out as Muslim in the workplace when people don't know you're Muslim. And then all of a sudden, like, wait, you're celebrating Ramadan, you're fasting this month, you're Muslim. So then those stereotypes start appearing. And you said, the media, the TV, the what is being brought about Muslims and what is being exposed about Muslims is not usually in a positive light.
Right. So have you noticed, or have you experienced your experience with the women with whom you've spoken and interviewed? Have any of them deliberately changed their names? Do you know?
No, I haven't spoken to anybody who has changed their name, but there's effort to appear as American as possible, whatever American means, because American is very diverse. But women I spoke to would make sure that they would speak in English with no accent. Made sure that they would not speak any native languages like Arabic or Urdu or any language you speak at home. So even they're speaking to their parents, they would try to speak at work with perfect English. Make sure that there's no additional stereotypes that come up in their workspace. Changing their names, I don't see women doing that, but I do see women changing their headscarf. So women have told me that they would try to reduce the appearance of their headscarf, maybe wear a scarf tied to the back, maybe wear a hat instead of a scarf, depending on where they're working. I even interviewed one woman who, had an experience, a traumatic experience, where she went to an interview and had someone ask her about the headscarf. So she told me, what, the next time I went for the interview, I took it off just to make it easier on myself. And then she struggled after that, because she's like, I took away something that's part of myself. And then when she didn't get the job because they didn't give her the job because the headscarf. The next job, she got the job, and she wasn't sure. She's like, did they hire me because of me? If I was wearing the headscarf, would they, would have been hired? So there's this questioning and this like uncertainty in who you are and how you should approach yourself. She did tell me that later on she did put the headscarf on again, because she just felt like it wasn't part of her. It was just not, she felt she took away part of her identity for work.
And it's interesting that, so our focus with this show is about Muslim women, but I'll just throw in how there are other people in other groups or ethnicities who change certain things or try to pass. And as you mentioned, whatever being American means, people, try to do that.
Yes. Yeah.
So go ahead.
There was actually a social media influencer who came out a couple of years ago when she wore a headscarf to the back, and she was light skinned. She's a Muslim woman, and she came out and she wrote this post about how wearing her headscarf, allowed her to the back, allowed her to pass, allowed people not to notice her as Muslim. And the backlash she faced from women of color who are Muslim, who wear the headscarf, I said, you know what? Yes, you can do that because you're a person who is light skinned, and you could pass as someone who's white, but for Muslim women who are of color, we don't that stereotype that comes along with being a person of color is not taken away by putting our headscarves to the back, because we still carry the stereotype of being a person of color. So it was just, and then it was almost like an educational experience for her and for also the readers and her, her followers, because they saw that yes, you can put your headscarf to the back and try to pass, but for women of color, they don't get that opportunity because they still have to carry that.
Exactly.
And they have to go navigate the workplace.
Yes.
Being a person of color.
So you mentioned earlier about years ago with the male colleague. What has been your own personal experience in the last years since that time? What have you experienced in this regard?
The past 10 years. I feel that, like I said earlier, that there are moments where I feel that things are really great and I feel like I am being accepted. And there are moments where people are questioning me or questioning, like I mentioned, something happens in the media and the attention that Muslims receive. If it's something that's, traumatic and something that's happening socially, people carry that fear into the workplace. It doesn't stay outside the workplace. It's carried into the workplace. Even presidential elections, that time when the elections, discrimination it's been recorded in studies that discrimination specifically to Muslims and just discrimination in general goes up. So yes, during that time, during election season, during anything the media produces and highlights this negative view of Muslims.
Yes.
My experience, I see even students ask me, like, they'll ask me in class, like, what do you think about that? We had a conversation once about education and are Muslim women allowed to be educated? And here I was, being an educator in the class, and like, we're so surprised to have you in the class. And I'm like, really? Like, so even that, that question that I don't, deal with my own personal life, that, Muslim women allowed to be educated, are allowed to go to school or get a job. I mean, I don't deal with my personal life. Yeah. Yes. So, and then in the classroom, students are like, oh, wow, you could do this.
But again, yeah. you're highlighting the stereotypes that come through the media, through social media platforms, through TV, through movies, and whatever else. What about, do you remember any heightened concerns during 9/11?
My first week of college, 9/11 happened. So my introduction, I was very young. I was 18 at the time. It was just introduction to the world, to the college. And I used to take public transportation to get to college. So I used to take a taxi because I wasn't driving. I didn't have a car yet. Take a taxi to the train station, a train to Newark, and then a PATH train from Newark, Jersey City, and then a bus from Jersey City train station to college. So I used to take so I used to see people on the way. And I remember that the day at 9/11, I was home that day. I didn't have school. I was off from work and from school. At the time, I was working at a bakery, a local bakery. And I remember the day I went back to college, the security at the college, he made a remark to me. He's like, he positioned his hand as if a gun, and he's like, I'm gonna kill you. I'm gonna kill Muslims. And I was just
Especially the
like,
security
the
person.
security, yeah, the irony of having the security, you know, and I remember coming off the bus and him doing this to me, and I was just like, oh, this is my introduction. This is it. I'm walking into college with this. And I remember even that day, and I remember it was a really difficult time. It was just really, everybody was scared. Muslims were scared, non-Muslims, everybody was scared because it was just, and I used to go to school near New York. So like this, you know, that heightened fear existed in everybody. I remember my professor told me to take off my headscarf. I was wearing at the time. She's like, you know, for your safety, take it off. We had a discussion about how I should take it off in class. So I navigated my college years with, you know, the looming, you know, the sadness of 9/11, but then the war started, and then having, you know, people on different sides, friends from high school who enlisted in the army, you know, friends in, you know, in college that were also enlisting, you know, family members who were going to war. So that was that feeling of which side are you on definitely existed, and being visibly Muslim added to that, you know, that pressure on me as a young person trying to go to school and just trying to finish our education.
Yes. So the pressure on you as a young college student and your professor's suggestion of taking off the scarf, did you?
Yes. Yes. I did not take it off. I kept it on. And even in our community, there were, you know, people telling my parents, like, tell your daughter to take it off because it's not safe for her, especially taking a train and a bus and being so visible. I decided to keep it on. I couldn't see myself without it. Yes, I've seen friends who took it off. I've seen my mom's friends who wear hats and continue to wear hats just to, you know, kind of not
Downplay who
appear.
they are.
Yes, yes, exactly. For me, I just couldn't see myself doing that. I couldn't see myself as wearing a hat or wearing my scarf, you know, and tying it to the back. This is who I am. It is a challenge. And you asked earlier, it is a challenge. Sometimes even going food shopping is a challenge. Because my kids is a challenge in public. But I believe I have faith. So I continue to carry that faith wherever I go.
Okay, let me ask you then. So in interviewing the women in your research, do you find that they have the same angst, they have the same feelings of the challenge and being torn as to what should I do, which way should I go? Is this going to inhibit my progress? What is my family going to think? You know, I'm going home, but I'm going out into the American society.
Yeah, definitely. Yes. Women have expressed to me that they feel this apprehension, they feel this angst about going to a job interview. How is their interview going to see them? Are they going to see them for their credentials, for their education, their skills, or they're just going to see somebody who's sitting across them wearing a headscarf? One woman I interviewed, you know, she was interviewing for a psychologist position and who had a degree and had all those skills. And she's like, I knew I had my background. And after the interview was over, he was like, okay, let's address the elephant in the room. So it was just like, and she was like, what are you talking about? She's like, are you going to work with that headscarf? And she was surprised. Like I had all, you know, nothing was wrong with my resume, but something was wrong with my headscarf. So of course, women do feel this pressure. Like I mentioned earlier, the woman who took off the headscarf because of her experience, her past experience being in an interview and not getting the job that she wanted because of the headscarf. So women do navigate that, you know, some women do think about taking it off and some women do take it off and some women say, you know what, this is how I come into the workplace. This is who I am. And I'm not gonna, you know, take away something that I believe in.
So
and
how is it what are your discussions to them? I know you can't give them any advice about going one way or the other, but what do you talk to them about in terms of that? Because I mean, being a Muslim woman yourself and in the workplace and the workforce and going everywhere and with children. So how do you help them or encourage them? What's it like to have to talk to them about this issue?
If I do talk to friends about, how to, I have friends who apply for jobs, like, what should I do when I come to apply? I think number one, educating yourself, knowing, your rights in the workplace. There are rights in the workplace. And, just, going into the interview, what rights do you have? As as just an individual going to the interview, but also as a Muslim woman going into an interview. And also if you get the job, what days can you take off? Are you allowed to, to take time to pray during your work hours? So knowing your rights is really important. And to channel that, the apprehension that we have into an opportunity to educate others that here we are, we're Muslim women. Muslim women are the second largest educated group in the US. So carry that, that confidence that, here I am and here's my skills and I'm gonna do my job. I'm here to do my job.
And I can only imagine that it's very tough. I mean, that's easier said. That's easier said
Definitely,
than done.
yes.
And even when you think about African American women and the hairstyles and just the complexions and just there's so many different things. Just because we have been inundated with so much about what America means in terms of how you speak and how you walk and how you carry yourself and how you dress. And just, being educated about your rights is true. And sometimes that still doesn't work, but educate yourself just about what you are allowed to do. Because you were talking earlier about someone who did not get a job, and it could have possibly have been about the scarf. So, educating yourself and being aware.
Exactly. I think educating yourself on your, first, why you're wearing the headscarf. Think about why you're wearing it. I think as women feel conviction, they feel that they are questioning themselves. So I think that is part of it. But I think largely, if you're going to enter the workplace wearing the headscarf, know your rights, your civil rights, know your rights as an employee. That's empowerment. Educating yourself is a part of your empowerment. And we talked earlier about the growth that happens, and a lot of women told me about that the growth that happens when they go into a workplace, and then people seeing them, getting to know different perspective on Muslims. And I tell women in that space also not to portray Muslims in a monolithic sense, but show that we're diverse. There's Muslim Americans are the most diverse group faith. So also present that to your work, to your peers, to your colleagues, to your employer, that the diversity exists within Muslim community. So you're educating yourself, but also educating others.
So it sounds as if a large part of your research, even with your interviewing, is helping with the education part, the
Yes.
self-education and societal education.
Yes. I think there's education, and it's two-sided. So you're educating yourself, but then also educating others.
Right. Exactly.
And it's a pressure. It is a pressure. It is a burden also, that they have, why do I need to educate others about who I am? It's a difficult situation. And it shouldn't be put on Muslims and Muslim women, especially in the workplace where you come and do your job. You just want to go in, do your job, and but the woman I spoke to, I interviewed, and through my research, I realized that's the only way to dismantle a lot of the stereotypes is education. And I think it's where it starts.
Yeah, there's a lot of miseducation though, and
Yes.
sometimes certain pieces of miseducation have been ingrained in
Yes.
certain groups, and it's very difficult to dig it out.
Exactly. Even Muslims, we carry that internalized um, uh, misconception of ourselves. The Institute of Social Policy and Understanding did a study on Muslims, Muslim Americans, and they came up with like a large number of Muslims who also internalized that hatred, self-hatred, which is remarkable. That how deep anti-Muslim bias exists in society. And this is why at this moment I'm studying education, because I want to get to the root of the issue, because it is the miseducation that you mentioned that
Yes.
exists. And it's amplified when someone sees a Muslim person. So even in the workplace or in the supermarket, wherever you go, it just becomes more like that fear, that anxiety, that those stereotypes start, you start questioning like why they wearing the headscarf, why they dress this way, why they fasting. And also those ideas doesn't come with why, it comes with a negative
Exactly.
connotation. So it's that's why, yeah.
You talked about the self-hatred, so to speak, but again, that has come from all of the stuff from the outside of us or
Yes.
outside of the person, and it's kind of like osmosis. If you are in a place where all of this is spewed at you, it's almost impossible to keep it out of your psyche.
Yes.
And people start to internalize it.
Yes. There's a concept that I believe in. Some people question it, but I believe in it, that it's actually in sociology, it's called contact theory, where you are in contact with somebody who's different, and you might carry those stereotypes of that person, but being with that person, seeing them, communicating, building a relationship with that person could reduce your own stereotypes. And I believe in it. And I feel like that's why the workplace is a perfect place to investigate that, because a lot of us spend more time in the workplace than they spend time with their families. We spend long hours. So you get to know your peers, you get to know your colleagues, your employer, your employees. So that's a great opportunity to share a piece of yourself, share about your identity, about who you are, where you grew up, your experiences, and yourself as a Muslim. So I think it's a great place to start, because you have that, you already build a relationship with that person.
And that's a good way to dispel the misconceptions, the miseducation, because again, with all that we hear that the media puts out there, and now with social media, there's so many fallacies and things out there that it's really a difficult situation to navigate. But with your doing this research and talking to more and more Muslim women, perhaps things will start to change and will continue to change, because there are people who just aren't quite sure how to navigate it. I'm wondering though, the last thing I want to find out, have you had any experience where certain Muslim women who are wearing the scarf and their encounter with Muslim women who are not? And how are those relationships? Because you talked about sometimes self-hatred and then trying to pass.
Yes. Are you talking specifically in the workplace or just in general?
In general, workplace or otherwise.
I'm getting more of a sense of, support for each other, because I feel that Muslim women are aware of what's happening, what people think of them. So I see that there's a support group that is happening on college campuses, happening in the workplace, where it's women, even women who are not Muslim, are supporting those who are, wearing the headscarf. There was a famous story of a college professor who wore the headscarf in, support of her Muslim, peers. Yeah. So I believe there's more of a support than a hatred or attitude of like, I don't care. It doesn't affect me. I'm not gonna care. I see more support. Yeah.
That's good. Well, Fatima, Koura, I am so glad to have spoken with
Oh.
you, and listeners, look, I hope you were educated. So thank you so much for talking with me today on this episode of Leafless, Not Lifeless. And thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. And I hope that I hope you got some education. And if you have a story where it appeared to be leafless, but growth was actually taking place, let me know. Send me an email, leaflessnotlifeless@gmail.com, and maybe we can share your story as well. Again, thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Thank you, Fatima. Thank you, listeners and viewers, and see you next time on the next episode of Leafless, Not Lifeless.
Thank you so much, Sharon.
You're welcome.